Okay, sorry, I'm live streaming, I think now. So let's go for it. Welcome to tip number 13, day number 13 of the 30 days, 30 tips challenge, how to quit sugar. The last tip, we talked about how important it is to pre-plan meals and food because our environment is so really what is called obesogenic, which it basically just encourages obesity. And basically anybody who just kind of goes with the flow about regarding their food and just like eats what there is, chances are they're going to be fat or sick or both from how they eat, because the truth is that the only foods that are available, that are most available and cheap and also very, very stimulating, hyper stimulating and hyper delicious, are these sugary, starchy, hyper processed foods that make us fat and sick. So one of the very important things when quitting sugar is to make your environment sugar safe. Now, let's face it, you know, you can go to like this some isolated tropical island and you'll never get stimulated to these hyper delicious foods. But the truth is, if you want to keep living your life, right, you're going to see advertisements for donuts and like, when you go on the autoroutes or whatever it is, and there's these huge signs and people around you are eating all these foods that maybe you have now made a decision not to eat anymore because you've decided that you want to quit that stuff, that for you, whatever reason it is that you've decided, whether it is temporarily or really as a lifestyle change. But really, this means, but, right? So there are a lot of things in our environment that hyperstimulate us to eat and drink all these addictive, hyper delicious foods, right? Very, very yummy foods. But there are places where we do have control, right? For example, at our homes. Now, maybe many of you who are listening to this don't live alone. Maybe you have family, maybe you have a partner, maybe you have children, grandchildren who come to visit, whatever it is. Of course, maybe you don't want to be that home that has no junk food or no snacks in it. I get it. That's perfectly legitimate. But the chocolate chip cookies do not have to be in a glass, transparent glass jar sitting on the counter, right? They could be maybe in a brown paper bag or some kind of a closed container where you can't see what's inside, and maybe in the pantry, maybe on a shelf that's not at eye level, below or above. Same thing with the ice cream in the freezer. Does it have to be exactly there, exactly every time you open the freezer, you see that Ben and Jerry staring at you back? Maybe put it at the back of the shelf or in a shelf that's not so, because we have this psychological thing that's out of sight, out of mind. Now, as much as we cannot put these hyper stimulations to eating sugary, starchy, hyper processed foods out of our mind completely. We can't prevent them completely, but we can certainly lower the intensity and the frequency of how many times and how strongly we are stimulated. If you're quitting sugar, well, certainly, at least that, for sure, that first month is not the time to start, that to start baking bread or baking cakes for the family. Maybe you need to buy a few so that you don't have that smell. Even if you have somebody in your family who likes to bake, I think it's perfectly legitimate to ask them for help and maybe for 1 month not bake breads and all these, very delicious and stimulating desserts around the house. So what I would say is it's really, really, this is really important and it's really critical. So the best would be just to really eliminate somebody who lives alone or whose family is really on board and is willing to help. It's certainly legitimate to ask to keep junk food out of the house, at least for the initial phase. And I have kids. I told them I would give them money. My kids were little when I went off sugar, but I basically gave them money and it said them to go to the local grocery store, get whatever you want, please, and that's all. And I didn't have it hanging around the house. So because I didn't want, I figure my kids needed a mother who is happy and, and sugar free and feels good with herself a lot more than they need any kind of chocolate bar around sitting around the house. And if you do feel that, yes, There does need to be these sugary, starchy junk foods around the house, but they don't have to be out on the counter. They shouldn't be in places where every single time you open a fridge or open your pantry or open a closet, they're going to be staring back at you. Put them in places where they're a little bit hidden from you, from your eyesight, because what we see is what there is. And then if you come home and I don't know, you had a bad day, and then your kids made you crazy, and all those chocolate chip cookies are sitting on the counter, the first thing that's going to happen is unconsciously you're going to reach for them. So make sure that when you quit sugar, as little as possible, lower as much as possible the visual, audio, smell stimulations of these really addictive, hyper processed, junky foods, which a lot of times, especially if you're trying to quit sugar, it's really, really important to get that stimulation as low as possible. If you can get them out of the house, it's the best. If you can't, don't leave them lying around where you can see them, smell them, hear them, as little as possible. So that's my tip for you today. If you like this video, please share it. And you can also sign up to my newsletter, especially if you want to get all these tips and lots of bonuses as well at the end of my challenge. So have a great day, wonderful evening. See you tomorrow with tip number 14.